5 planets are destroyed in one shot. Did that mean anything to you?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm here with my boys, Daniel and Hervé.
Yo.
Hi.
Hi, Daniel. Do you want to tell everyone what we're going to be doing today?
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. Last week we finished the Star Wars prequels, and now we're moving on into the sequel trilogy, starting with The Force Awakens today. I saw it twice so far. I saw it once in theaters back when it came out, and then once again preparing for this. What background do you have with this movie?
I saw it a long time ago, and I don't remember anything that happened in this episode. I think this was either this and another Star Wars were the only Star Wars that I watched previously to this actual series that we're doing. But yeah, I didn't remember anything about this Star Wars at all. So then, obviously, rewatching it a couple of days ago was refreshing.
I think I'm the same with you guys as well. I watched it for the first time when it came out. And funny enough, I actually watched it the same way kind of Jonathan's gone through this experience, where I kind of did a binge of all the prequels because I was introduced to it by an ex's parent. But I was introduced to sort of Star Wars, sort of the original trilogies, the last show on the prequels, and then obviously went to go watch this. And then from then, haven't watched it again until recently, preparing for this as well. So that's my experience with it.
And Jonathan, I think you've not seen the next two in the trilogy, right? At all.
I don't think so, no.
What about you, Hervé?
I have seen it.
So this one is kind of a bridge where we'd all seen it before, but to varying degrees of familiarity, but the next two are going to be fresh impressions overall. So Jonathan, specifically, you don't know how the trilogy is going to end, right?
No.
You don't know where characters are going, where the plot is going. So let's see how that goes. So do you want to give your overall, both of you really give your overall impressions of this movie?
I felt like this was more of a emotionally driven storyline. It's heading towards a more emotionally driven storyline rather than like a political one. So I think from Luke's journey till Anakin's journey, it was very like political based, like trade wars, etc., etc. But now it seems like his entering, from what I watched from Star Wars Episode 7, seems more of a personal journey, like a journey more adventurous and more emotionally driven. That's kind of like relying on nostalgia. Obviously, you see like characters coming back and stuff. Which, by the way, I don't have an issue with it because I think I found this more entertaining in terms of entertainment value. I found this more entertaining than all the previous Star Wars movies, and I think that's because of there's other elements, but I think that one of the main elements was because obviously the acting. The previous film was very theatrical. This one seems a bit more, feels more authentic in a way. But like I said, I did enjoy the whole, emotionally driven journey. There was some questions that I had while watching this because it did feel like the whole training element to become a Jedi has kind of disappeared, and it feels like, especially with Rey's character, it felt like she just had the Force and she was put in situations where the Force would show, and she was kind of like a master already of the Force in certain moments. And I was like, that's a bit strange. Like it feels like it's kind of moved away from the whole you're gonna have to train to actually master the Force. But overall, it was all right. Overall, I liked it. It wasn't all right. I think overall, this was probably top. Out all the Star Wars I watched so far, I'd definitely say it's top on the list, top 3. I had a fun time with this.
So one of the things that this movie gets criticized for is that it's basically a rehash of A New Hope with elements of the other movies sprinkled in, right? So it's again set for the most part on a desert planet. There's still somebody who starts from humble beginnings, discovers they have the Force, and then goes out on an adventure to save the galaxy. There's again a droid with plans that are important to the plot. There's a Death Star that needs to be destroyed. There's an Empire. There are rebels. So it's, at least from a high level point of view, it is very similar to A New Hope, right? Like, did this jump out at you? And do you think it makes it a better movie, a worse movie, or does it not matter?
You're right. It definitely is. It was very similar to New Hope. I would have liked to see it gone forward and seen like a kind of like newer world, because like I said, it was very similar in terms of the storyline. And like I said, I think it was just relying heavily on nostalgia, especially with the storyline. And obviously with the, like, I remember I was speaking to her about this before, especially like the battle with, I forgot what his name was, but Han Solo's son, Darth what?
Kylo Ren. He's not a Darth in this. He's not Kylo Ren.
Okay, Kylo Ren. Well, I called him Darth because he was wearing all black like Darth Vader. But with his character, it was obviously similar with when Luke faced his father. The scenario. So it was like, okay, it was very, like I said, it was heavily reliant on nostalgia. So I could appreciate it from that aspect, but I would have still liked to see kind of like a fresher, newer story. So I do understand where the frustration comes from. In terms of how much they affect me, not so much. I think I was 50-50 about this film. I wasn't ecstatic about this film. Like, it wasn't like, oh, one of the best things I've ever seen. But like I said, it was fun. It was entertaining. You know, there were many things which I liked in terms of, like, I don't know what they're called, but the white soldiers,
the stormtroopers.
I'm telling you, they are the most, like, they provide the funny in Star Wars. Honestly, like, it's always there. Like, their characters is always funny. So there was things that I did like about this film in terms of the storyline itself. I don't mind personally, but I would have liked to see like a newer, fresher storyline. But it didn't like disappoint my experience.
To me on that, knowing that there was like such a gap between sort of the prequels and the newer sort of sequels, and obviously knowing the reception that the prequels had at the time when it came out as well, and sort of in terms of like people not raving about it or being sort of super happy about it, I felt like it was the safe thing to do. To kind of not, of course, it would have been better if they maybe tried to take a little bit more sort of chances with it, but it seemed like the safe way to reintroduce and bring new people into the Star Wars world, hoping that they would then obviously of course build on from that after introducing sort of all of these sort of new characters and stuff like that. But for me, rewatching it was fun. Like it was fun to kind of like see a lot of sort of like kind of like the character interactions. Again, sort of some of them was sort of super similar. It was like, especially like Kylo Ren's character, it was like quite interesting to kind of see him have that sort of idolized sort of his grandfather in Darth Vader and this, that, and the other, and sort of wanting to be sort of similar to him, and of course sort of everything that comes with that as well. So yeah, I like overall I feel like it was probably on their part the smart thing to do, just to play it safe, reintroduce people into it, ease people back into sort of the Star Wars world, and then build from there.
So at the time specifically, all of the marketing was aimed at this is not the prequels. So it goes back to familiar settings with the Sand Planet, right? And all the original marketing focused very much on that part of it. Not entirely, but to a large part. They also talked about how they were using practical effects wherever possible, because the prequels had been criticized for having cartoonish looking CG effects. And they also avoided any kind of world building or defining the state of the galaxy, but in order to contrast themselves with the prequels, which have a reputation for being just space politics, with people droning on about trade disputes and things like that, and Senate votes and all of that. And this movie completely ignores that whatsoever, right? Like there's very little done to show what the galaxy actually is like a generation after the events of the original trilogy. Did that jump out to you guys at all? Like this, did it get in the way of the story? Was it a good thing to just focus on these very specific characters in these very specific locations, or would this have needed more world building and more build up?
I think one thing that definitely stood out to me, because obviously, by the end of episode 6, the Return of the Jedi, I believe is what it's called. You see that again, the Empire's been defeated and this and the other. But then when you come into sort of this world, you then have the First Order that's risen from the Empire, and it would have been interesting to kind of see what had transpired in that time. It just seems, again, it seems like I think that's probably the thing that annoyed me the most, was that it seemed like they went for the safe option of having this big bad galactic empire that's ruling the galaxy, and then you happen to have like a resistance sort of freedom fighters that are having to sort of kind of oppose it again, having that duality or the sort of opposition of sort of good and bad. Whereas it would have been interesting to kind of explore maybe kind of like the origins of the First Order, or sort of kind of like them starting to like take back control of the sort of the Empire, sort of from the rubbles of the Galactic Empire that was there before, or even just like seeing some type of like power struggle, or like, because again, once the Empire is gone, there was a massive vacuum of power in the galaxy, and it would have been maybe interesting to see sort of maybe different factions trying to sort of work their way on top, including the Resistance as well, trying to sort of see who would then become the most kind of like dominant in the galaxy. And I feel like that's probably the biggest thing that I took away from it, was that was a decision that I didn't like.
Yeah, like I said before, it seems like the whole like political side of the film was gone, and it seemed more going into the whole like adventurous, yeah, just like the whole adventurous side to it, rather than actually getting into the gritty like they did in the previous movies. And and clearly that's because they're trying to reintroduce a new audience, and obviously with the age certificate, it's like okay, so maybe in their heads it's like I don't think anyone's. I think it's a 12, it's rated 12, right? I believe so. So
Probably.
yeah, so I think they were thinking, okay, anyone roughly around that age, if we want them to start like in Star Wars, I don't think they're gonna get into the same formula that was used in the prequels or in the previous movies. So they tried a new approach, and that approach is to pretty much make it as I don't want to say generic, but like any other adventurous films, like any like the sci-fi movies where it's just more so of a battle, and like it's just less on the storytelling, more on the actual aesthetics of the film.
I feel as well is that they had like some interesting pieces in there that they could have like really expounded on and sort of told really good stories from. You had the first time seeing a stormtrooper without the helmet, and obviously seeing them being a defector from sort of the First Order and going on sort of kind of their own adventure, which would have been super interesting. And again, I touched on Kylo Ren, and obviously sort of him idolizing his like grandfather, and this and the other. And you do see that story kind of like play out in the movie, but again, I don't think it's founded on or delved into as much as it probably could have been, because I don't think the movie had that particular sort of main focus towards it. I think again it was like more so trying to reintroduce the world and sort of kind of again make people kind of give that feel good feeling again about Star Wars, as opposed to sort of really digging deep into some of the sort of themes and sort of maybe like stories and messages behind the characters or the sort of story they want to tell.
Yeah, speaking of feel good feeling, like in one scene, the capital of the Republic gets destroyed, right? And one thing for me where I think the movie is dragged down by the complete lack of world building is that I did not feel a thing when the Senate was destroyed, right? We had not seen this place before. We had not seen these characters before. We had not seen a single frame of what the Republic looks like, which also means we don't know if it's worth saving, right? Because the last time we saw the Republic was in Episode 3 when it was completely dysfunctional and you could say deserved to fail because it was unable to provide like a better solution to things. Did you have a similar reaction to that or a different one to the destruction of the Republic, the Republic's capital, which was a major plot point, right? And which should logically be a huge deal in the story and in the world. But did that have any resonance for either of you?
I can't lie, my mind's a bit blurry on this because I watched this quite a few days, like 5 days ago. But so was that in the beginning or
somewhere in the middle where they fire the super weapon and there's this red beam of energy that shoots across the universe and you see a bunch of people on a balcony and the sky turns red and then planets explode. And that was the, if you didn't notice it, that was the capital of the Republic and everybody died. And as a result, the Republic was, well, we don't even know what happens to the Republic because of it, but like 5 planets are destroyed in one shot, right? So did that mean anything to you?
Well, I didn't even know that was them, so clearly it didn't.
Right.
I think I missed it the first time I watched it, and again I didn't feel anything for it the second time watching it.
Yeah, is that different from Alderaan? In Episode 4, a planet that gets destroyed. We never see Alderaan. We don't know anybody from Alderaan other than Leia, and we don't know her very well at that point. And like, is that different? Is that the same? Is that what's your take on that?
Please re-jog my memory.
So Leia gets captured by Vader. It's brought aboard the Death Star, and she gets interrogated for the location of the Rebel base. And when she refuses, the Death Star destroys her home planet, just as a show of force. So again, an entire planet is destroyed that we've not seen before. We've never been on Alderaan, right? We don't know who died.
Okay, yeah, I remember.
So is that the same deal? Is that again?
I like for someone that hasn't watched it in a very long time. I haven't watched it for a couple of years. I think it would probably hit different, more so because one, you're introduced to the Death Star for the first time, and that's the first time that they're flexing their power, that this is a world destroyer, and then you're sort of really understanding the might of sort of the Galactic Empire. And then 2, of course, you've got sort of Princess Leia, a character that we've been introduced to, and sort of she's being kind of like interrogated and this and the other. And of course, it's then putting her in a difficult position so that when her home planet is being destroyed, it's because of sort of the decisions and sort of the choices that she's making, which then adds a little bit more emotional weight to it, as opposed to just a planet being destroyed for the sake of like the planet being destroyed for it to be cool.
Yeah, for me, the big difference is that Alderaan, it's not important really. Right? It could have been any planet. It's more that we show what the Empire is able and willing to do. Whereas with the destruction of the capital of the New Republic, that is kind of everything that the heroes have built, right, in the last 30 years. And it gets destroyed in one scene. And I think that is kind of a big deal, right? Like, I think the movie should have built up what the accomplishment was so that when it gets destroyed, we know what has been lost.
And to be fair, I felt like they did a similar thing with Han Solo's character. I kind of think they done him like they brought his end to a bit of an injustice. The way that they just killed him off. I don't know if he is fully. I don't know if he's actually killed, but I don't think anyone's gonna survive that. Because obviously we've got a couple more movies left. So I don't know if he reappears or anything. But yeah, I just think that whole scene was a bit like they just kind of killed him off in a way which wasn't as impactful as it should have been, because we don't really know much about Ben, so it was like we couldn't really feel the weight of the pretty much betrayal that he showed towards Han Solo in that scene, because we don't really know much about Ben. So I was like, okay, so not only did you kill off Han Solo in such a it felt very unjust. It felt very unjust.
Like, can I just say on that scene though, that was good cinematography in that scene, in terms of like when you're seeing like the conflict in his character between sort of his struggle between like the light and the dark side or whatever, and then I think when like the red beam kind of comes over and it kind of like slowly like casts a like red light on him, and then you just then see him like have that conviction to go to the dark side. I think that was just like beautifully done.
I think it's supposed to mirror the showdown between Obi-Wan and Vader in Episode 4. Right, where two characters meet and they have a confrontation and they talk about a conflict or a grievance that they've had that we've not seen at that point in A New Hope. We hadn't seen what history Darth Vader and Obi-Wan had, and here we don't really see what Kylo Ren's and Han Solo's relationship has been like. We've been given little hints and a couple of lines that have kind of started to paint a picture, but we don't really know what their relationship has been like and why for the past 30 years they've drifted apart in this way to the point where they've evidently not talked to each other for years. I'm not sure that there was enough build-up for it to actually matter that much. And I think it was also dragged down by this whole thing about how Han Solo is a loser in this. Like, he's basically regressed to his 20-year-old or 30-year-old self, to the point of wearing the exact same clothes and hanging out with his best friend in the same old ship as before, doing the exact same thing. So if there had been some kind of sense of what he had been up to and why that maybe had created a rift between him and his son, that would have meant more. And I think as A New Hope shows, you can do that in very few lines, right? You don't have to show the entire thing, but you can convey what this is about in not that much time, I think. And I think that the fact that Han Solo's entire screen time is essentially based around being a grumpy old man who just has walked away from everything, I think just leaves no time for this to kind of build up properly.
Nah, I definitely agree. And obviously with Anakin and Luke, we, had time to grow that emotional connection with them because we saw their journeys. So that's why I also that's why I felt like Han Solo was kind of done injustice, because we don't really know Ben. So, the significance of him killing Han Solo didn't really have any impact, because this guy's just another enemy to us, rather than like it didn't really hit that it was his son that killed him. And obviously, like you said, we don't know the history behind the fallout. So it's like, this is just another killing, but you killed a legend in the whole franchise. So yeah, I think that was too soon. I think they should have waited at least a next movie before doing that, so they can give us Ben's story as well. And also, Rey, I'm sure who they don't reveal who Rey is in this movie, right? So, because I still don't know who the hell she is.
Yeah, let's go through the main characters one by one. So, we've started talking about Kylo Ren. Like, what's your general impression of Kylo Ren? Like, separate from his relationship with his father, like just as a character, as an antagonist, as the grandson of Darth Vader, and so on. What impression did he make on you?
He felt less dark than the other antagonists. Also, Skywalkers have a very dysfunctional family, so I have realized. But yeah, he just felt less dark and more conflicted, which I liked. I like this approach because I think, with the other Darths or the other antagonists that we've had, who look like Darth Vader's, which, well, this one he's not Darth, but he's pretty much in line with the other Darths. They were very, dark, and they were very like level-headed, and of course there were times of Darth Vader where he was conflicted, but it showed like in like it didn't really show as much. You only saw like little cracks of it, whereas with Kylo it was like throughout the film, like it just felt more like throughout the film it felt like he was conflicted. Like, there was even a scene where he was looking at Darth Vader's helmet and he was saying, I can feel the light inside of me. Something like, I don't know if he was asking, yeah, he was pretty much just telling you, it was like that was his God, and he was like, I can actually feel, and just confessing his sins, I can feel the light inside of me. Obviously, he doesn't want to, turn to the light. So I was like, yeah, this guy, yeah, he just felt, like I said, he felt less dark, more conflicted, which I enjoyed that approach with this character.
So one thing I think it's interesting about Kylo Ren is that he is a dark side user, but he is a Star Wars and a bad guy, right? Who feels an obligation to evil, but is tempted by good. Like he says this in a few places in the movie, right? And he feels like he has an obligation to live up to his heritage and legacy as the grandson of Darth Vader, and he very much follows in his footsteps and he styles himself after him. But we kind of see that it's a bad fit, right? Like he has to change his voice in order to appear more menacing. He says he feels a temptation towards the light, but he tries to resist it, which is the exact opposite of what Star Wars characters usually do. They usually start out as good and then fall to the dark, whereas here we have somebody who starts out evil and at least is shown on the brink of falling to good, whatever that means, right? So I think that has a lot of potential, and we'll see in the next movies how that unfolds. And just one brief mention, I think his lightsaber is really cool as well. Star Wars has a problem with recycling imagery, right? And every time they add something new, and that works, I think that's something that's notable. Like Episode 1 introduced double-bladed lightsaber with Darth Maul, and here they have this big, heavy lightsaber with the cross guards and the flickering lightsaber that kind of reflects his anger issues and the fact that he doesn't do things properly and always takes shortcuts and stuff like that. So I thought that was a really cool detail. How about Rey? So she's positioned as the next hero, right? She follows in the footsteps of Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker. She grows up on a desert planet as an orphan, scavenging for scraps. She grows up literally in the ruins of the past, right? Like in the ruins of Star Destroyers and Walkers, and her entire life so far has been kind of living off the scraps of better days or the days of legend that we know from previous movies. So what was your impression of Rey and your takeaway about what kind of personal character she is?
She was good. It just felt like she wasn't enough, but I don't mean that in a bad way. As in, I think the more that the next film, hopefully it will start to feel like her character has some sort of significance in the franchise, because it still feels a bit underwhelming.
In what way?
Like, for example, like using the Force, for example, the way that it all just came about in certain situations where someone who trained someone like for example, in comparison to Anakin and Luke's, right, when they were put in those situations where they're facing, for example, when Luke's facing Darth Vader, right, we already see how that comes. We already see what happens when he first doesn't train with the Force. He gets his arm cut off. Well, he did kind of train, but his training wasn't complete. The significance of that, he got his arm cut off. And then there was another situation where when Anakin faced what's the Sith, where he got his arm cut off as well, and that's because he wasn't fully trained as well. So it was like, okay, so now when Rhea was in a situation where she wasn't fully trained and she's against the biggest, like she's against the antagonist, it's like she had the upper hand, and I was like, there wasn't like any moment with her where it was like, where you could really feel a huge sense of danger in comparison to the to Anakin, to the previous main character. So I think her character felt a bit underwhelming because everything just came to her. And I get it, like even with Luke, when he had when Luke and Anakin had the Force, they were kind of like, you can tell that they were special, but they still had to train that speciality that they had. Whereas with Rey, it seems like I said, she didn't really train for it. It was like, okay, it came to her, she used it and she kind of succeeded. So I was like, that's the thing that felt a bit underwhelming. So I feel, like I said, now that she met Luke at the end, it feels like, she's gonna go through her training, and like I said, hopefully that underwhelming feeling that I get from my character will go. But yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot has been said about how powerful Rey is and how easy things come to her, and we'll get into that as the trilogy goes on. But I think one of the differences that Anakin and Luke use the Force intuitively, and then put in the work to train, right? So yeah. Anakin participated in pod racing, which he only could do because of the Force, and Luke saved the day in the attack on the Death Star because of his intuitive use of the Force, and then after that he went to training, right? Whereas here it seems a bit like she doesn't have the Force at all, and then it just switches on, and now she's a Jedi, right? It kind of feels a little bit like that. Now this is the first movie in a trilogy, right? So a lot can happen still, but yeah, I think it kind of like one thing I didn't really understand when I first watched it was why she wants to be a Jedi, right? She doesn't seem to have heard of them. It doesn't seem to be her goal to be a Jedi, but then suddenly she is one, and the movie seems to equate having the Force and being a Jedi, right? So she has the Force, so she has the Force because she's a protagonist, and because she has the Force, she's a Jedi, and that seems to be. The movie seems to think that this is obvious. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from, where Luke and Anakin had reasons to become Jedi, and here it kind of happens.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying as well. But wait, did she reveal that she wants to be a Jedi? Or, because I swear, when Han Solo offered her job, she rejected it because she needed to go back home.
Yeah.
She wanted to go back home because I think she was waiting for her father to return, was it?
She's waiting for her parents to come back.
Yeah, so
when does she off on Jakku when she was young, and she's been waiting for them to return.
So when does she reveal that she wants to be a Jedi?
Well, she becomes one, right? She uses the Force. She uses a lightsaber. She's very much positioned by the end of the movie as a Jedi.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that she wanted to become a Jedi.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing, right? It's not clear. It doesn't seem like she makes that decision. It just kind of happens.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with that. So maybe they'll just maybe the approach was, okay, she's pretty much given a gift that she doesn't want. I'm guessing that was the approach, because like I said, there wasn't any real point where they actually mentioned that she wanted to be a Jedi. And when she was given the chance to actually roll with Han Solo, she rejected that as well, because obviously her main goal was to go back home and, hope that her father would come back. And then I don't know who kind of told her, I think it was the alien. I don't know what that alien was, but when she found the lightsaber, I think, was it the alien that said, what you're looking for back home, it will not happen, or you will not find, or something like that. There was someone that pretty much told her, your dad's not coming back. So then that's when it kind of
sounds like something Maz Kanata would say, but I don't remember that exact line.
Okay, yeah. So that's when the kind of the realization happened, that's when the realization kicked in. So then after that, I don't think it revealed. I don't know what. So then after that, her objectives kind of changed. So I don't remember why she was looking for Luke. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So she pretty much was looking for Luke. She went to go look for Luke because now she's kind of accepted that she is a Jedi. But obviously that wasn't made clear, because she encountered the Darth guy. I forgot his name again, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kylo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kylo. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Moving on, what do we think about Finn?
He wasn't bad, He was. I feel like he was a good sidekick.
Is he a sidekick?
Well, okay, not really. He's kind of like Robin. Even though Robin isn't the main character, he does play a big role. So he's kind of like Robin. And I think his character, I think they make a good duo. I don't really have any complaints. There wasn't really any highlight moments with his character. We could just say, besides him being in love with Rhea after the first time meeting her, so that's told me that he's not really around a lot of women, or those soldiers or whatever are not really around women. But his character, I don't think there was any highlight moments, but I think they make a good duo.
So one thing that's new for a Star Wars character is the idea that a stormtrooper is a character in the first place, right? So far they've all been faceless and nameless, and also he is a deserter, and he's kind of a stormtrooper rebel, right? He deserts from the stormtroopers due to his conscience, and then goes on to fight the Empire, right? What do you think about that?
I didn't even know that the stormtroopers were not brainwashed, but they I don't know. Were they brainwashed? Because
So the stormtroopers in the Empire were just soldiers. They were just recruited, and then these stormtroopers are child soldiers that are kidnapped and brainwashed and conditioned, and then put into stormtrooper uniforms and then are sent out to fight.
Okay.
So he was abducted as a child, was brainwashed and conditioned, and then forced. He was forced into that position. He did not volunteer. He was not conscripted. He was abducted and brainwashed.
Okay, yeah. Well, I liked the approach because it was a new approach, and there's always curiosity around those troopers. So I think kind of introducing that into the storyline was smart.
I think, like I said earlier, Star Wars kind of has this constant need for new ideas, and the idea of a stormtrooper character, especially a stormtrooper deserter, I think has a lot of potential. So we'll see where that goes in the next movies. One thing that struck out for me is that he does not, like, as soon as after he deserts, he just behaves like a regular person, right? He seems really well adjusted. He seems to have no problems killing stormtroopers, right? Within minutes, essentially, of escaping. And you can say that maybe in the escape, he does it out of necessity, but he never wants them. He never tries to negotiate with them. He never tries to he never tries to reason with anybody. As soon as he becomes a good guy, they are just the fastest enemy that they've always been, right? And I think that is a little bit jarring, and there's no lingering remnant of his conditioning. There's no doubts. There's no trauma. There's no grief. Nothing. He just becomes action protagonist after that, and it reminds me a little bit of like a video game character who has a tragic background in order to be interesting, but then they're just there for the action plot, right? And the tragic backstory never comes up after the introduction. So I think the concept and the potential is really interesting, but it seems kind of hollow a little bit, right? Because it never matters afterwards, at least in this movie.
Yeah, you can definitely say that, because I remember in like the Halo series when the main character, obviously they were I don't know if they were brainwashed. I think they were like brainwashed mixed with like, I don't know if they were programmed in some sort of way. I don't know how it was, but they were abducted from when they were children as well. And then there was some, I don't know if they would put a chip in them or they were brainwashed, but the brainwashing was heavy, right? And then when the main character starts to break out of it, you can still see fragmentations of like the brainwashing still being at play. And like you could see, like you could feel the internal fight that was happening between him and like obviously his old self of being brainwashed. So I do agree with Finn's character. You didn't see that at all. But to be fair, he wasn't put in situations where he could, for example, like talk to like the other stormtroopers, because it was just non-stop action. So I do understand why it could, like, that's just the writer's fault, to be fair. It wasn't really his fault.
I mean, everything that happens is the writer's
yeah.
good and bad.
But I definitely do agree. I think we should have seen that like internal conflict and just fragments of his old self as a brainwashed trooper show out in this film, because it just felt like he's best being transformed like that. And I was like, you were abducted as a child, and as soon as you're put in an actual situation where it's combat, obviously I understand you freaking out, but there's nothing else to it. You've already just transformed like that, and it's a bit that's not really realistic.
Yeah. What do we think about Poe Dameron? He's kind of presented as the third main character, right? Like he's the hotshot fighter pilot. He's the hero of the Resistance. Any thoughts on him?
I don't really think his character had any cultural impact. He was cool. He was like the cool guy. But I don't think it really had any cultural impact in the Star Wars franchise. But he was a good, like, he was fun, but he just didn't have really any impact for me. Like, I could have lived without his character, but he wasn't bad. Like, I did like the fact that he was in there.
Yeah, he doesn't really have a hook, right? Like, like anything where you say, okay, I want to see where that goes, right? At least that was my takeaway with it.
Yeah.
Last thing before we wrap up. What do we think about the First Order as an enemy, as a faction in the world, as the driver of the plot?
I am intrigued about the actual. I don't know what he is, but he's like some sort of the alien that they all split. That Sloke. Yeah, I'm intrigued about his character, but in terms of the enemy itself, they don't really seem too different from the previous enemies in the movies. There wasn't really anything. Yeah, like I said, there wasn't anything different for me. I didn't really think much of them. They were just the enemies. They were just getting in the way of Rey's journey, pretty much.
Were you surprised that it's the Empire again?
No, to be fair, I didn't know what the new threat was gonna be.
Yeah.
So in terms of being surprised, I wasn't surprised, but I'm like, okay, what else could the threat be? So it would have been a good idea to maybe introduce the new enemy, but it was like, but who? Like who would have been the new enemy?
Yeah.
So I don't mind, but yeah, I wasn't surprised because like, okay, so who else could be the new enemy?
Yeah. One thing I did like, I think for me, the best part of the movie is the first opening 15 minutes or so, which is where we introduce the two main characters and we see the raid on the village, right? And one thing that was interesting to me about the First Order is that they look a lot like the Empire and they behave a lot like the Empire, but they are just pirates, right? Like they are raiders, they attack a small village, and that is apparently a major operation for them. But it's still stormtroopers, it's still TIE fighters and stuff like that. But then after 15 minutes, it kind of stops mattering, and they're just the Empire. I think that goes hand in hand with the complete lack of world building, right? That we don't know how big the Republic is, how big the First Order is. Are they peer powers, or is this like a bunch of pirates who kind of got their hands on some TIE fighters, or something in between, right? Like the lack of that scale, I think, really makes it feel more generic than it needs to.
I definitely hear that. I hear that.
So to wrap up, this was the first chapter in a new trilogy. This was very much supposed to lay the foundation for a new era. There's 2 more movies coming in kind of the main series. The next one is called The Last Jedi, which you're probably the only person on the world that has not heard of it. What happens in that movie, right?
Yeah.
So what are your expectations for that movie, considering it's the next one in the series, it's called The Last Jedi?
I'm guessing that's gonna be about Rey. So she's pretty much the last Jedi. I don't think there wasn't any other Jedis in this film, was it?
Well, Luke appears right at the end, right?
Yeah, but besides Luke, Luke, I don't think there was any other Jedis. So maybe it is gonna revolve around. Oh, it shouldn't revolve around Luke, but I think it's about Rey becoming that Jedi, even though Luke's still in the film, and I'm guessing I'm sure he's going to be in the second film, and he's going to be like training her and stuff. It's like she's going to technically be like the last Jedi, because kind of Luke went kind of like he just disappeared from the face of the earth. So even though he is a Jedi, he kind of isn't a Jedi at the same time. So I'm guessing it's going to revolve around Rey, and I'm hoping it's going to revolve around Rey, and it's not going to rely heavily on the nostalgia, because they've given us nostalgia now, and they've given us like the whole new spin to it to reintroduce a new audience. So that's cool. Now, actually kicking the story now. You know what I'm saying? Kicking the story. If Rey is going to be the main character now, develop her character arc and just give us that good story revolved around Rey's journey now becoming that Jedi, last Jedi.
Okay. So, any last words, or should we call it here?
I didn't even give it my rating this film. I'll give it another 6. I'll give it a 6.5. Like I said, it was entertainment value. It was great. Story, in terms of like the story itself, it wasn't as good as the other ones, but yeah, I think that's what their intention was. But yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 6.5.
Okay. However, you want to do your thing?
Thank you for working with us. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And of course, tune in to the next episode where we dig a little bit deeper into The Last Jedi.
Love you guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.